Jake Martinez pushed his cleaning cart down the long hallway of the Galactic Trade Station. The wheels squeaked softly as he moved from one section to another. He had been doing this job for 3 years now, and he knew every corner of this huge space station. The work was simple but honest. Clean the floors, empty the trash, fix small problems, and stay out of everyone's way. The trade station was like a small city floating in space. Every day, hundreds of different alien species came here to buy and sell things. Some were tall and thin with blue skin. Others were short and covered in fur. There were beings made of crystal, creatures that looked like walking trees, and aliens that Jake could not even describe. Most of them barely noticed him. Humans were not considered important in the galaxy. They were useful for simple jobs like cleaning and basic repairs, but that was about it. Jake did not mind being ignored. He had a good life here with his wife Lisa. She worked in the station's small human section, teaching the few human children who lived on the station. They had a small apartment, enough food, and each other. That was more than many people had. Tonight was like most nights. Jake finished cleaning the office areas and moved toward the food court. This was always his last stop before going home. The food court was huge, with restaurants from dozens of different worlds. The smells were strange, but not unpleasant. Some aliens ate things that looked like glowing soup. Others preferred what looked like rocks, but probably tasted much better. As Jake mopped the floor near the back of the food court, he noticed something unusual. In the far corner, sitting alone on a bench, was a small alien child. The child was from the Zephyrian species. Jake knew this because Zephyrians were easy to recognize. They were tall and thin with pale blue skin and large silver eyes. This one was clearly young, maybe the same age as a human 10-year-old. The child wore simple gray clothes that looked worn and old. Most Zephyrians Jake had seen wore beautiful robes with bright colors and shiny decorations. This child looked very different. The little one just sat there, watching all the activity around the food court, but not participating in any of it. Jake finished mopping and moved to the next section. But he kept looking back at the child. Something about the way the little one sat there so still and quiet made Jake feel sad. The child looked lonely. The next night, Jake saw the child again. Same spot, same gray clothes, same quiet watching. The child never seemed to eat anything or talk to anyone. Jake began to pay more attention. He noticed that the child would arrive sometime in the evening and sit there for hours. Sometimes other Zephyrians would walk by, but they never stopped. To check on the child, on the third night, Jake decided to do something about it. He had brought his dinner with him as usual. Lisa always packed him a good meal for his evening shift. Tonight it was a ham sandwich, an apple, and some of her homemade cookies. Jake looked at his food, then at the child sitting alone in the corner. Jake walked over to the child slowly. He did not want to scare the little one. As he got closer, he could see that the child was even smaller than he had thought. The large silver eyes looked up at him with surprise. Most beings on the station avoided humans, and humans usually avoided everyone else. "Hello there," Jake said softly. He crouched down so he would not look so tall and scary. "I'm Jake. I work here cleaning things." The child tilted their head but did not say anything. Jake could see that the child understood his words, though. "Are you hungry?" Jake asked. He pulled out his sandwich and held it up. "I have plenty of food. My wife Lisa makes great sandwiches." The child's large eyes looked at the sandwich, then back at Jake's face. Jake could see the child was thinking about it. "It's okay," Jake said with a smile. "I really do have enough. Look." He broke the sandwich in half and held out one piece to the child. "Try it. If you don't like it, that's fine." Very slowly, the child reached out with thin, four-fingered hands and took the sandwich. Jake noticed that the child's hands were shaking slightly. Whether from fear or hunger, Jake could not tell. The child took a small bite, chewed carefully, and swallowed. Then the child's eyes went wide with what looked like surprise and pleasure. The child took another bite, then another. "Good?" Jake asked. The child nodded quickly. Jake smiled and sat down on the bench next to the child. He ate his half of the sandwich while the child finished the other half. When they were done, Jake offered the apple. The child accepted it gratefully. "What's your name?" Jake asked. The child looked at him for a long moment, then said in a soft voice, "Zara." "Zara, that's a pretty name. Are you from Zephyria?" Zara nodded. "I've never been there, but I've heard it's beautiful. Purple sunsets and crystal forests, right?" Zara's eyes lit up. "Yes, the crystals sing when the wind blows through them, and the sunsets make the whole sky look like it's on fire, but in a good way." Jake smiled. This was the most the child had said since he sat down. "That sounds wonderful. Do you miss it?" Zara nodded sadly. "Very much." "Are you here with your family?" Zara looked uncomfortable. "Sort of. There are other Zephyrians here, but they are busy with important things. They don't have time to talk to me." Jake felt his heart break a little. No child should have to sit alone every night while the adults in their life were too busy to care. "Well," Jake said, "I'm not too busy. If you want, you can sit with me tomorrow night. I usually eat my dinner about this time." Zara looked at him with those big silver eyes. "You would do that?" "Of course. Everyone needs a friend." The next night, Jake brought extra food. He found Zara sitting in the same spot, but this time she looked up and smiled when she saw him coming. Jake sat down beside her and unpacked his dinner. Tonight Lisa had made chicken sandwiches and packed some fruit and crackers. "How was your day?" Jake asked as he handed Zara a sandwich. "Quiet. The adults had meetings. I stayed in our rooms and read. What do you like to read?" "Stories about adventures. And books about other planets. I like learning about different worlds." Jake nodded. "That sounds interesting. I bet you know a lot more about the galaxy than I do." They ate together in comfortable silence for a while. Then Zara said, "Jake, why are you being nice to me?" The question surprised Jake. "What do you mean?" "Most beings don't talk to children unless they have to. Especially not human beings. I was told that humans keep to themselves." Jake thought about this. "Maybe most do. But I think everyone deserves kindness, no matter where they come from or how old they are. And you look like you could use a friend." Zara smiled. It was the first real smile Jake had seen from her. "Thank you, Jake. This is the best part of my day." Jake felt a warm feeling in his chest. "Mine too, Zara. Mine too." From that night on, Jake and Zara had dinner together every evening. Jake learned that Zara loved stories about space travel and distant planets. She told him about the crystal forests of her homeworld and how they changed colors with the seasons. She described the great cities of Zephyria with their tall spires that reached into the clouds. In return, Jake told her about Earth and the few other human worlds he had visited. He talked about his wife Lisa and their simple but happy life. He shared stories about his own childhood and the books he had loved to read. Zara began to relax more each night. She would laugh at Jake's jokes and ask questions about human customs. She seemed fascinated by the idea that humans ate so many different kinds of food and that they cooked it in so many different ways. Jake started bringing special treats that Lisa made: cookies, small cakes, and fruits that Zara had never tried before. Each new food was an adventure for her, and Jake loved watching her face light up when she tasted something she enjoyed. For 2 weeks, this became their routine. Jake would finish his cleaning work and find Zara waiting for him in their usual spot. They would share a meal and talk about their days, their dreams, and their worlds. It was simple, but it made both of them happy. Jake never asked too many questions about why Zara was alone so much or why the other Zephyrians seemed to ignore her. He could tell it was a painful subject for her. Instead, he focused on making sure she felt cared for and valued, at least for those few hours each evening. Neither of them knew that their simple friendship would soon change everything. 2 weeks passed since Jake first met Zara. Every evening, he looked forward to their dinner together. It had become the best part of his day. Zara was no longer the quiet, sad child he had first seen. She smiled more now and talked about many things. She told Jake stories about her homeworld and asked him questions about human life. Jake learned that Zara was traveling with a group of adult Zephyrians. They were on some kind of business trip that took them to many different space. Stations and planets. Zara never said exactly what kind of business, but Jake got the feeling it was important. The adults spent their days in meetings and left Zara alone in their rooms or wandering the station. "Don't they worry about you being alone?" Jake asked one evening as they shared Lisa's famous chocolate chip cookies. Zara shrugged. "They make sure I have food and a place to sleep. They think that is enough." Jake felt angry when he heard this. Any child needed more than just food and shelter. They needed attention, care, and love. But he kept his feelings to himself. Getting angry would not help Zara. Double quotes. "Well, you always have a friend in me," Jake said. "Even if I'm just a human custodian." "Just a human custodian?" Zara repeated. "Jake, you are the kindest person I have met in a long time. Being human has nothing to do with it. Being a custodian has nothing to do with it. You have a good heart." Jake felt his chest fill with warmth. Coming from this wise little child, those words meant everything to him. During their dinners, Zara told Jake more about Zephyrian culture. She explained how they valued knowledge and wisdom above almost everything else. She described the great libraries of her world, where scholars from across the galaxy came to study. She talked about the beautiful art her people created and the music that could make people cry with its beauty. "Do you miss the music?" Jake asked. "Very much. On Zephyria, there is always music somewhere. Street musicians, concert halls, even just people humming while they work. Here, everything is so quiet." The next night, Jake brought something special. Lisa had an old music player that could play songs from many different worlds. Jake had loaded it with soft, gentle music from Earth. "This is human music," he said, handing Zara the small device with earphones. "It's not like Zephyrian music, but I thought you might like it." Zara put on the earphones and Jake started the player. Her eyes went wide as the soft piano music began. She closed her eyes and listened, a peaceful smile spreading across her face. When the song ended, she looked at Jake with tears in her silver eyes. "It's beautiful, Jake. Different from our music, but beautiful. It sounds like ... like hope." From that night on, music became part of their routine. Jake would bring the player, and they would listen to different songs while they ate. Zara especially loved the gentle songs, piano music, soft guitars, and simple vocals. She said they reminded her of home, even though they were completely different from Zephyrian music. Jake began to notice small changes in Zara. She stood a little taller. She spoke with more confidence. She laughed more often. Their friendship was good for both of them, but Jake could see it was especially important for Zara. She was becoming more like the happy child she should have been all along. One evening, as they shared sandwiches and listened to a quiet song about friendship, Zara asked Jake about his life before the space station. "I grew up on Earth," Jake said, "in a small town where everyone knew everyone else. My family didn't have much money, but we had each other. My parents taught me that it doesn't matter how much you have. What matters is how you treat other people." "That sounds wonderful," Zara said. "I wish I could see Earth someday." "Maybe you will. The galaxy is big, but it's also smaller than people think. Paths cross when you least expect them to." Zara smiled. "I hope so. I would like to meet Lisa and see where you came from." Jake promised to tell Lisa all about Zara. His wife would love to hear about their friendship. Lisa had always said that kindness was the most important thing a person could show to the world. As the days passed, Jake noticed that Zara seemed worried about something. She would start to say something, then stop. She looked over her shoulder, more often as if she was afraid someone might be watching. "Is everything okay?" Jake asked one evening. Zara hesitated. "We might be leaving soon. The adults are finishing their business here. They said we would move on to the next location in a few days." Jake felt his heart sink. He had known this day would come, but he had not prepared himself for how sad it would make him. Zara had become like family to him. "I'm going to miss you," Jake said honestly. "I'm going to miss you too. More than you know." Zara's voice was quiet and sad. "Jake, if we leave, I want you to know that these 2 weeks have been the happiest I've had in a long time. You made me feel like I mattered. You do matter, Zara. Don't ever forget that. The next evening, Jake brought extra special food. Lisa had made Zara's favorite cookies and packed a meal with all the things the child had said she enjoyed most. They ate slowly, neither of them wanting the evening to end. No matter where you go, Jake said, remember that you have a friend who cares about you. And maybe someday, when you're older, you can come back and visit. Zara nodded, but Jake could see she was trying not to cry. I will never forget you, Jake Martinez. You showed me what kindness looks like. They sat together for a long time that night, listening to music and talking about happy memories from the past 2 weeks. When it was time for Jake to go home, they hugged goodbye. It felt like it might be the last time. The next evening, Jake arrived at their usual meeting spot with a heavy heart. He had prepared himself to say goodbye to Zara, even though it would be difficult. But when he reached the corner where they always met, it was empty. Jake waited for an hour, thinking maybe Zara was just late. But she never came. He asked a few aliens if they had seen a young Zephyrian, but no one had noticed her. Most beings on the station paid little attention to children, especially quiet ones like Zara. Jake went to the information desk and asked about the Zephyrian group that had been staying on the station. The clerk, a bored-looking alien with green skin, checked his computer. They checked out this morning, the clerk said. Left on a transport ship headed for the Outer Rim territories. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Zara was gone, and he had not even gotten to say goodbye properly. He walked home slowly, feeling empty and sad. For the next 3 days, Jake went through his work routine, but his heart was not in it. Every evening, he found himself walking to the food court and looking at the empty corner where Zara used to sit. The station felt different without her. It felt lonelier. Lisa noticed that Jake was sad and asked him what was wrong. He told her about Zara and their friendship. Lisa listened with tears in her eyes. You did a wonderful thing, Jake, she said. You gave that child love and attention when she needed it most. That's a gift she will carry with her forever. Jake hoped Lisa was right. He worried about Zara traveling with adults who did not seem to care about her feelings. He hoped someone else would be kind to her. Wherever she was going on the 4th morning after Zara's departure, Jake arrived at work to find the entire station buzzing with unusual activity. Ships were arriving constantly, much more than normal. Security guards were everywhere, and everyone seemed nervous and excited at the same time. Jake's supervisor, Pete Collins, found him in the supply room where Jake was getting his cleaning equipment. Jake, something big is happening, Pete said. Word is that some kind of important delegation is coming to the station, very important. Security has been tripled and all the senior staff are running around like crazy. What kind of delegation? Jake asked. Pete shrugged. Nobody's saying exactly, but I heard it's from one of the major galactic powers. Could be military, could be diplomatic. All I know is that we've been told to keep our heads down and do our jobs. And whatever happens, don't get in anyone's way. Jake nodded and went about his work, but he could not shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. The timing seemed strange. Zara had just left, and now someone very important was coming to the station. It was probably just a coincidence, but Jake had learned that in space, coincidences were rare. As he worked, Jake overheard conversations between various aliens on the station. Everyone was speculating about who was coming and why. Some thought it was a trade delegation. Others believed it might be a military inspection. A few aliens whispered that it could be royalty of some kind. By afternoon, the entire station was on high alert. Jake had never seen so much security in one place. Armed guards from a dozen different species patrolled the hallways. The docking bays were cleared of all normal traffic, and then, just as Jake was finishing his shift, the announcement came over the station's communication system. Attention all station personnel and visitors. Prepare for the arrival of an Imperial delegation. All non-essential personnel are to remain in designated areas until further notice. Imperial delegation? Jake's blood ran cold. In the galaxy there were only a few powers that called themselves empires, and one of them was the Zephyrian Empire. Jake looked out the window toward the docking bays and saw something that made his heart race. A massive ship was approaching the station. It was bigger than anything Jake had ever seen, gleaming with precious metals and bristling with weapons. The ship's design was unmistakably Zephyrian. The station had never seen anything like it before. The massive Zephyrian ship filled the main docking bay like a mountain made of metal and crystal. Its hull gleamed with precious stones and metals that caught the light in beautiful patterns. Energy weapons lined its sides, each one powerful enough to destroy a small moon. Around it, smaller warships moved in perfect formation, their own weapons ready and waiting. Jake stood with the other station workers in a designated area, watching through the thick glass windows. His hands were shaking and his mouth felt dry. The ship was so big that it blocked out the stars beyond. He had never seen anything so magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Director Webb, the station administrator, was pacing back and forth like a caged animal. The Arcturian's blue skin had turned almost white with fear. He kept checking his communication device and wiping sweat from his forehead. "This is unprecedented," Webb muttered to his assistant. "An Imperial dreadnought at our station. What could they possibly want here?" Jake wondered the same thing. The Zephyrian Empire was one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. They controlled hundreds of star systems and commanded respect from every species Jake had ever heard of. Their emperor was said to be wise and just, but also incredibly powerful. When the Zephyrian Empire wanted something, they usually got it. Workers around Jake were whispering to each other. Most of them looked scared. A few looked excited to see such an important ship up close. Jake just felt confused and worried. Something deep in his gut told him this was connected to Zara, but that seemed impossible. She was just a lonely child traveling with some minor Zephyrian officials. She could not possibly be important enough to bring an Imperial fleet to their station. The massive docking bay doors began to open with a sound like thunder. Jake felt the vibration through the floor and walls. Everyone stopped talking and watched as the doors fully opened to reveal the interior of the great ship. What came out first were soldiers, but these were not ordinary soldiers. They wore armor that seemed to be made of liquid silver, flowing and shifting as they moved. Their weapons hummed with energy that made the air itself seem to vibrate. They marched in perfect rows, their steps synchronized like a deadly dance. Behind the soldiers came advisors and courtiers wearing robes that seemed to capture starlight. The fabric moved like water, showing colors that Jake had never seen before. These beings walked with the confidence of people who had never known poverty or fear. And then came the figure that made everyone in the viewing area hold their breath. The Emperor of the Zephyrian Empire was tall, even by his species' standards. His pale blue skin was marked with intricate silver tattoos that seemed to glow with their own light. His robes were works of art that probably cost more than the entire trade station. Jewels and precious metals were woven into the fabric in patterns that hurt to look at directly, but it was his eyes that caught Jake's attention. They were large and silver, just like all Zephyrians, but there was something familiar about them. They reminded Jake of someone, though he could not quite place who. The Emperor's voice carried easily across the huge docking bay when he spoke. It was deep and commanding, the voice of someone used to being obeyed without question. "I am Emperor Kalen of the Zephyrian Empire," he announced. "I have come to this station seeking information about my daughter, Princess Zara, who disappeared from her escort 3 days ago." Jake felt like the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. Princess Zara, the quiet, lonely child he had been sharing sandwiches with, was a princess. Not just any princess, but the daughter of the most powerful ruler in this part of the galaxy. Around him, other workers were murmuring in shock and confusion. Jake could barely hear them over the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Zara was royalty. The little girl who had loved Lisa's cookies and asked questions about Earth was the heir to an empire. "My daughter is young and may have appeared lost or alone," the Emperor continued. "She has pale blue skin, silver eyes, and would have been wearing simple gray clothing. I am seeking anyone who may have encountered her or provided her with assistance during her time on this station." Jake's mind raced. Zara had been wearing simple gray clothes, just like the Emperor described. She had been alone most of the time, just sitting in the food court while the adults she was traveling with ignored her. But those adults had not been minor officials. They had been her royal escort, and they had failed to protect the most important child in the Zephyrian Empire. "I offer great rewards to anyone who helped my daughter," the Emperor said. His voice was still commanding, but Jake could hear something else in it now: worry, fear, love. "But I also promise severe consequences for anyone who harmed her or who withholds information from me." The crowd of workers and visitors shifted nervously. No one stepped forward. Jake stood frozen, his mind spinning with the implications of what he had just learned. He had helped Princess Zara, but he had not known who she was. Would the Emperor believe that? Would he be angry that a lowly human custodian had been feeding his daughter leftovers? Director Webb stepped forward, his legs shaking so badly he could barely walk. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said in a voice that cracked with fear, "our security systems show no record of Princess Zara on this station. Perhaps she was taken elsewhere by those who wished to harm her." The Emperor's silver eyes fixed on Webb with an intensity that made the administrator take a step backward. "She was here," the Emperor said firmly. "My intelligence sources confirm it. Someone on this station interacted with her regularly over a period of 2 weeks. Someone fed her, spoke with her, and showed her kindness when those responsible for her safety failed in their duty." Jake felt sweat running down his back. The Emperor was not angry about someone helping Zara. He was grateful. But Jake was still too scared to move or speak. One of the Emperor's advisors, a tall Zephyrian woman wearing robes covered in gems, whispered something in his ear. The Emperor nodded and spoke again. "I know my daughter was on this station for 2 weeks. I know someone cared for her when those charged with her protection did not. I know this person showed her more kindness than she had received in months." The Emperor's voice grew warmer. "I am not here to punish. I am here to thank." The crowd began to look around at each other, searching faces for any sign of who might have helped the princess. Jake felt dozens of eyes scanning the group, trying to identify the mystery person who had befriended royalty. His supervisor, Pete, caught Jake's eye from across the room. Pete had seen Jake eating with Zara during their evening shifts. Pete knew that Jake had been the one sharing meals with the child. Pete raised his eyebrows and nodded slightly toward the Emperor, encouraging Jake to speak up. Jake's mouth felt like it was full of sand. His hands were trembling and his heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. This was the Emperor of the Zephyrian Empire, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. And Jake was just a human custodian who mopped floors for a living. But then Jake remembered Zara's words from their last evening together. "You have a good heart," she had said. "Being human has nothing to do with it. Being a custodian has nothing to do with it." Jake took a deep breath and stepped forward. His voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Your Majesty, I think I'm the person you're looking for." The Emperor's silver eyes locked onto Jake with laser focus. The entire docking bay fell silent. Jake could hear his own breathing echoing off the walls. "Speak," the Emperor commanded. Jake swallowed hard and tried to make his voice stronger. "My name is Jake Martinez. I work as a custodian here on the station. For 2 weeks, I shared my meals with a young Zephyrian child who said her name was Zara. She was alone most evenings in the food court, and she looked hungry and sad. So I gave her half of my sandwiches and some fruit. My wife Lisa packs good lunches." The Emperor studied Jake for a long moment. Jake felt like those silver eyes could see right through him, reading every thought and memory. "You fed my daughter?" the Emperor said quietly. "Yes, sir, I didn't know she was a princess. She was just a little girl who looked like she needed a friend. Every night for 2 weeks. Yes, sir. We would sit together in the food court and talk. She told me about Zephyria, about the crystal forests and the purple sunsets. She missed home. She seemed very lonely." The Emperor's expression began to change. The stern, commanding look softened slightly. "What else did you talk about?" Jake felt a little braver. She loved stories about adventures and other planets. I told her about Earth and about my wife Lisa. We listened to human music together. She said it sounded like hope. At the mention of music, the Emperor's eyes widened slightly. She listened. To your music? Yes, sir. Soft piano music mostly? She said it reminded her of home, even though it is different from Zephyrian music. The Emperor was quiet for several moments. When he spoke again, his voice was much gentler. Jake Martinez, you showed kindness to my daughter when she needed it most. You treated her not as a burden or an obligation, but as a person worthy of care and attention, Jake nodded. She was easy to care about, Your Majesty. She's a special kid. Yes, the Emperor said, and for the first time he smiled. She is very special indeed. Jake stared at the Emperor, not understanding what he meant. Continue being Zara's friend? How could that be possible? She was a princess who lived in a palace somewhere far across the galaxy. He was just a human who cleaned floors on a space station. I don't understand, Your Majesty, Jake said carefully. He was still shaking from fear and confusion. How could I continue being her friend? She's royalty and I'm just a custodian. The Emperor stepped closer to Jake. Up close, he looked even more impressive. The silver tattoos on his skin seemed to move and shift in the light. His robes made soft sounds like whispered music as he walked, but his expression was kind now, not frightening. Jake Martinez, the Emperor said, let me tell you about my daughter's life before she met you. The Emperor gestured to his advisors and they moved back to give him space. The crowd of workers and visitors was completely silent, hanging on every word. Princess Zara is my only child, the Emperor began. She is the heir to the Zephyrian Empire, destined to rule billions of people across hundreds of star systems. From the day she was born, she has been surrounded by people whose job it is to serve her, protect her, and prepare her for her future role. Jake nodded, trying to understand where this was going. But those people, despite their loyalty and dedication, made a terrible mistake. They forgot that before she's a princess, Zara is a child. They provided for her every physical need, but ignored her emotional ones. They treated her like a precious object to be protected rather than a person to be loved. The Emperor's voice grew sad. For months, my daughter has been lonely and unhappy. She has been surrounded by adults who see her only as their duty, their burden, their responsibility. No one has simply enjoyed her company or cared about her feelings. Jake felt his heart breaking as he listened. Poor Zara, living in a world where everyone around her saw her title instead of seeing her. 3 weeks ago, the Emperor continued, I sent Zara on a diplomatic mission with some of my most trusted advisors. It was meant to be educational, a chance for her to see other worlds and learn about the galaxy she will someday help rule, but those advisors failed her completely. The Emperor's eyes flashed with anger for a moment. They treated her exactly as everyone else does. They made sure she was fed and housed, but they ignored her completely otherwise. They spent their days in meetings and left her alone to entertain herself. They saw her as an inconvenience. Jake was beginning to understand. The adults Zara had been traveling with were not minor officials. They were important advisors who had been trusted with the most precious person in the Zephyrian Empire, and they had failed. When Zara disappeared from her escort 3 days ago, those advisors panicked, the Emperor said. They searched everywhere, but could not find her. They were terrified to contact me and admit that they had lost the heir to the Empire. But she wasn't lost, Jake said quietly. She came back to them. Yes, the Emperor smiled. She returned to her rooms on their ship the morning they were scheduled to leave your station. But she was different. For the first time in months, she was happy. She was excited. She talked constantly about her new friend Jake, who shared his food with her and listened to her stories. Jake felt warmth spreading through his chest. Zara had talked about him to her father. My daughter told me everything, Jake. She described your kindness, your patience, your genuine interest in her as a person. She said you were the first adult in a long time who seemed to actually enjoy spending time with her. The Emperor paused and looked directly into Jake's eyes. She also told me that you treated her exactly the same whether you thought she was important or not. You did not help her because you wanted something in return. You helped her because you saw a lonely child who needed a friend." Jake nodded. "That's all I saw, just a kid who looked sad and hungry." "Exactly," the Emperor said, "and that is why I am here." One of the Emperor's advisors whispered something in his ear. The Emperor nodded and turned back to Jake. "The advisors who were responsible for my daughter's care have been relieved of their duties. They will never again be trusted with something so precious. But you, Jake Martinez, showed my daughter more genuine care in 2 weeks than they showed her in months." Jake did not know what to say. He had just been trying to be kind to a lonely child. He had never thought it was anything special. "This brings me to my offer," the Emperor said. "My daughter has requested that her food friend be allowed to join our journey home. She wants you and your wife to come to Zafaria as honored guests of the royal family." Jake's mouth fell open. "You want us to come with you? To your home planet?" "Yes, not as servants, but as friends of the princess. You would have your own quarters in the palace, freedom to come and go as you please, and the gratitude of the entire royal family." Jake's mind was spinning. Leave the space station, travel to Zephyria, live in a palace? It seemed impossible, like something from a dream. "I don't understand," Jake said. "Why would you want us there?" "We're just humans. We don't know anything about royal life or empire business." The Emperor smiled again. "Jake, you possess something that is very rare in the galaxy, especially among those who live in palaces and rule empires. You have the ability to see people for who they really are, not for their titles or positions. You treat everyone with the same basic kindness and respect." The Emperor gestured to the crowd around them. "Most of these people, if they knew they were talking to a princess, would change completely. They would bow and scrape and try to impress her. They would see her crown before they saw her face." Jake nodded. That was probably true. "But you saw a hungry child and shared your food. You saw a lonely child and offered friendship. You never asked who she was or where she came from. You simply cared about her well-being." The Emperor paused. "My daughter needs people like you in her life. She needs to understand that true worth comes from character, not from birth. She needs to see examples of genuine goodness and kindness." Jake thought about this. "But what could I possibly teach a princess?" "You could teach her what you taught her these past 2 weeks. The friendship is not about what you can get from someone, but about what you can give. That kindness should be offered freely without expecting anything in return. That every person, no matter how small or seemingly unimportant, deserves to be treated with dignity." The Emperor's voice grew more serious. "Jake, my daughter will someday rule an empire. The decisions she makes will affect billions of lives. I want her to remember, when she sits on the throne, what it feels like to be cared for simply because she's a person worthy of care." Jake felt overwhelmed. This was too much responsibility. How could he help raise a future empress? "I can see you are worried," the Emperor said gently. "You think you are not qualified for such a task. But that is exactly why you are perfect for it. You do not seek power or influence. You do not want anything from my daughter except her happiness and well-being." The Emperor gestured to the ornate chest full of treasure. "I could give you all the wealth in that chest, and it would not repay what you have done for my family. But if you come with us, if you continue to be Zara's friend and teacher, you would give her something far more valuable than money." "What's that?" Jake asked. "You would give her the knowledge that she is loved for who she is, not what she represents. You would show her that true leadership comes from service to others, not from being served by others." Jake thought about Zara sitting alone in the food court, night after night, while the adults responsible for her ignored her completely. He thought about how her face had lit up when he offered to share his sandwich. He remembered her excitement when she heard human music for the first time. "She really wants us to come?" Jake asked. "She has talked about nothing else since she returned. She wants to show you the crystal forest she described to you. She wants your wife Lisa to meet her, tutors and see the royal kitchens." She wants to share her world with the people who cared enough to share theirs with her. Jake looked around the docking bay. He saw his supervisor Pete, who was nodding encouragingly. He saw Director Webb, who looked like he might faint from shock. He saw dozens of other beings who were watching this conversation with amazement. "Can I ask my wife first?" Jake said. "This is a big decision. Lisa should have a say in whether we leave our home here." The Emperor smiled broadly. "Of course, take all the time you need. We will remain at the station for 2 days while we resupply and complete some business. You can give me your answer before we depart." The Emperor paused. "But I should warn you about something." Jake felt a flutter of worry. "What?" "My daughter has become quite fond of your wife's cooking, even though she has never tasted it. She has made me promise that if you come with us, Lisa must teach the royal chefs how to make proper human sandwiches and chocolate chip cookies." Jake laughed for the first time since this whole amazing conversation had started. "I think Lisa would be happy to do that, Your Majesty." "Excellent," the Emperor said. "Then we understand each other." The Emperor turned to address the crowd. "The business I came here to conduct is complete. My daughter is safe, and I have found the person who cared for her. You may all return to your normal activities." As the crowd began to disperse, the Emperor turned back to Jake one more time. Jake walked home slowly, his mind spinning with everything that had happened. The Emperor of the Zephyrian Empire wanted him and Lisa to come live on the royal world as friends to Princess Zara. It seemed impossible, like something from a fairy tale, but it had really happened. The treasure chest full of wealth was proof that it was all real. When Jake opened the door to their small apartment, Lisa looked up from her reading with a smile. She was grading papers from her students, sitting at their tiny kitchen table under the soft light. "You're home early," she said. "How was work today?" Jake sat down across from her and took her hands in his. "Lisa, something incredible happened today. Something that's going to change our whole life." Lisa could see the serious expression on Jake's face. She put down her papers and gave him her full attention. "What happened? Are you okay?" Jake told her everything. He started with meeting Zara 2 weeks ago and explained how they had become friends. He described sharing meals and listening to music together. He told her about Zara's loneliness and how much their friendship had meant to both of them. Lisa listened with growing amazement as Jake explained that Zara was actually a princess. When he got to the part about the Emperor arriving with a fleet of warships, Lisa's eyes went wide. "The Emperor himself came here?" she asked. "To our little trade station?" "He came looking for Zara, and he wanted to thank whoever had been kind to her." Jake squeezed Lisa's hands. "Lisa, he offered us a chance to go with them to Zephyr. To live in the palace as friends to the princess?" Lisa was quiet for a long moment, processing everything Jake had told her. Finally she spoke. "Jake, are you sure this really happened? It sounds like something from a dream." Jake pulled out a small device the Emperor had given him. It was made of precious metal and gems, clearly worth more than anything they owned. "The Emperor gave me this. It's a communication device so we can contact him with our answer." Lisa held the device carefully, feeling its weight. "It was real. This was all really happening. What do you think?" Jake asked. "Should we go?" Lisa was quiet again, thinking. "Jake, tell me about this little girl. What was she like?" Jake smiled, remembering his evenings with Zara. "She was sweet and smart and curious about everything. She asked questions about Earth and human customs. She loved hearing about your cooking, even though she'd never tasted it. She was just She was just a good kid who needed someone to care about her. And she's really a princess? The heir to the entire Zephyrian Empire. But when I was with her, she was just Zara, just a lonely child who wanted a friend." Lisa nodded slowly. "And the Emperor wants us to continue being her friends? He said she needs people in her life who will care about her as a person, not as a princess. He wants her to learn about kindness and friendship before she has to rule an empire." Lisa stood up and walked to their small window. Outside, she could see the lights of the space station and the stars beyond. "Jake, we've had a good life here. Simple, but good. Are you ready to give that up?" Jake joined her at the window. "I don't know. This is scary, Lisa. We'd be leaving everything we know. But I keep thinking about Zara sitting alone in that food court, night after night. If we don't go, who's going to make sure she doesn't get lonely again? Lisa turned to look at her husband. She had married him because he had a good heart, and that same good heart was what made him want to help a lonely child. What does your gut tell you? Jake thought about it. My gut says that little girl needs us, and maybe we need this chance too. How many people get the opportunity to make a real difference in someone's life? Lisa smiled. Your gut is usually right about these things. They talked for hours, weighing the pros and cons. They would miss their friends on the station. They would miss the simple comfort of their familiar life. But they would also have the chance to help a child who had touched their hearts. They would see new worlds and experience things they had never dreamed possible. Finally, as the station's artificial night cycle began, they made their decision. The next morning, Jake used the communication device to contact the Emperor. Within an hour, a small shuttle arrived to take them to the Imperial ship. Jake and Lisa packed their few belongings and said goodbye to their friends on the station. Pete Collins, Jake's supervisor, shook his hand firmly. You're doing a good thing, Jake. That little girl is lucky to have you. Director Webb, still nervous about the whole situation, wished them well. Give our regards to the Imperial family, he said formally. The shuttle ride to the Emperor's ship was unlike anything Jake and Lisa had ever experienced. The craft moved smoothly through space, and through the windows they could see the massive Imperial vessel growing larger as they approached. When they docked, they were greeted by the same advisor who had stood beside the Emperor the day before. She was kind and welcoming, explaining that they would be given quarters in the guest section of the ship and would be treated as honored friends of the royal family. But before they could see their rooms, someone came running down the corridor toward them. Jake, Lisa! It was Zara, but she looked completely different now. Instead of the simple gray clothes Jake remembered, she wore beautiful robes that marked her as royalty. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style, and she wore a small tiara that caught the light. But her smile was exactly the same. Zara? Jake said, opening his arms. The princess ran to him and hugged him tightly, not caring that her formal robes might get wrinkled. I can't believe you came, Zara said, tears of joy in her silver eyes. I was so worried you might say no. We couldn't say no to you, Lisa said warmly. Jake has told me so much about you. I feel like I already know. You, Zara turned to Lisa with excitement. Are you really going to teach me how to make chocolate chip cookies? Lisa laughed. If that's what you want, then yes. I'd be happy to. Father says you make the best sandwiches in the galaxy, Zara continued. He wants to try one too. Jake and Lisa exchanged glances. The Emperor wanted to try Lisa's sandwiches. It seemed impossible, but everything about this situation was impossible. Emperor Kalen appeared in the corridor, walking toward them with a warm smile. Jake, Lisa, welcome aboard. I trust your accommodations will be comfortable. Your Majesty, Jake said, we can't thank you enough for this opportunity. No, the Emperor replied, it is I who should thank you. Already I can see the difference your friendship has made in my daughter. She has not stopped smiling since she learned you were coming. Lisa stepped forward, still somewhat nervous about meeting royalty. Your Majesty, Jake tells me that Zara is interested in learning about human cooking. The Emperor's eyes lit up. Indeed. My daughter has described your food with such enthusiasm that our entire kitchen staff is curious to learn your techniques. I'd be honored to share what I know, Lisa said. Excellent. Perhaps you could start tomorrow? I confess I am quite curious about these chocolate chip cookies myself. Over the following days, as the Imperial fleet traveled towards Zafia, Jake and Lisa settled into their new life. Their quarters were larger and more luxurious than their entire apartment had been, but they were made to feel at home, rather than like guests. Zara visited them every day, sometimes bringing her tutors to meet the humans who had become so important to her. She showed them around the ship, explaining Zephyrian technology and customs. She was patient with their questions and delighted in their amazement at everything they saw. Lisa spent time in the kitchens, teaching the royal chefs how to make human food. The chocolate chip cookies were an immediate hit with everyone who tried them, including the emperor himself. Word spread through the ship that the human woman could create something called comfort food that made people feel happy and cared for. Jake found himself in an unusual position. The emperor often invited him to informal conversations, asking about human perspectives on leadership and governance. Jake was nervous at first, but he quickly realized that the emperor genuinely valued his opinions, not because he was an expert, but because he represented a different way of thinking. "You have taught my daughter something valuable," the emperor told Jake one evening as they watched the stars from an observation deck. "You have shown her that true leadership means caring for those who cannot repay you." "I just shared my lunch with her," Jake said. "Exactly," the emperor smiled. "You saw someone in need and helped them, expecting nothing in return? That is the kind of leader I want my daughter to become." When they finally reached Zephyria, Jake and Lisa were amazed by the beauty of the world Zara had described. The crystal forest really did sing in the wind, creating music that seemed to come from the planet itself. The purple sunsets painted the sky in colors that took their breath away. The royal palace was vast and magnificent, but it was also warm and welcoming. Jake and Lisa were given their own wing with rooms that looked out over gardens filled with flowers that glowed softly in the evening light, but the best part was watching Zara in her home environment. She was still the same curious, kind child Jake had befriended, but now she was also confident and happy. She introduced Jake and Lisa to everyone as her dearest friends, and it was clear that their presence in her life had changed her for the better. Years passed, and Jake and Lisa became permanent members of the royal household. They watched Zara grow from a lonely child into a wise,